Okay. Ruko Tabaot. Welcome everyone. First of all, thank you to our sponsor, Rita Geller. This is second.
Learning, ladies. Just because this is the last one doesn't mean you gotta stop learning.
Very good. Very good. Thank you, Rita. So, and also, thank you to everybody who's been a loyal customer, and I hope that it's been beneficial to you. It's certainly been beneficial to me. I want to just give, and we have some special guests. Not everybody here is over 55. You might have noticed. Although I tell you, I bought a bottle of whiskey in Walgreens last week, and they carded me. And I said, thank you very much.
And I write as a card.
So,
Even if I want.
what we've been talking about is basically we've been learning Mishnah and Gemara together, and if you've been following what we're doing, I'm trying, as the cases come along, to find something, a parallel in our own lives, because what we've been doing, Bava Metzia is talking about basically laws of contract, found articles, disputes between people, and a lot of those, most of those actually, can be compared to what actually goes on in our daily life. And so then I was thinking, how about the discussions that take place? Because you'll have one scholar is mentioned, and then someone else is mentioned, and you think that they are in the same room together at the same time, just as we are. But it's not so. Very often they could be separated in distance and in time. They could be a couple hundred years apart from each other. So I thought, what sort of a comparison? Maybe like a text message, right? If I send Harry a text message and she doesn't see it for a few days or something, then she responds. So it's not as if we're in the same room together, but we are in a way responding to one another. And that's, in a certain sense, I mean, it's a long distance and a long time span, but the conversations are ongoing. And the basic way that the disputes that we've been talking about get settled is in a court, right? And courts are universal. The 7 Noahide laws, right? We all know about the Shiva Mitzvos of B'nai Noach. In fact, I was reading that there is a movement around the world now among people who are not Jewish but want to commit themselves to following those 7 Noahide laws. And the 7 Noahide laws are that a person should not worship idols, not to blaspheme, not to curse God, not to commit murder, not to commit adultery or sexual immorality, not to steal, not to eat flesh torn from a living thing, right? And to establish courts of justice. So without courts, it's not just a Jewish concept, it's a universal concept that we must have a way to settle disputes, and it's a way that it's accepted by everybody. Because otherwise you basically have a chaotic situation. So the courts have to be there, they have to be accepted, the rules have to be clear, and so what we're talking about is how those rules are put into practice. Jewish courts, there are several levels of Jewish courts. There's the basic court of 3 judges, there's a court of 23, there's a court of 71. And the types of cases that are settled are more and more complex as you get into the higher numbers, obviously. And of course, a couple of weeks ago, we learned Parsha Yisro, Yitro, and the great contribution that he made, right, was that he explained to his son-in-law that if you don't delegate, you're going to work yourself to death, right? Because Moshe was settling all the cases himself. And imagine how many cases can come up with several million people. And so he set up the system where you had people who were in charge of small numbers, then someone in charge of them. And Napoleon said that the most that one person can actually command is 9 people. So he designed his army that each unit had no more than 9 people commanded by 10. And then, so 10 of those would be 10 more. And so the system of Jewish courts is set up like that. And we really learned a lot in the few weeks that we've been doing this. And when you think about it, so many of your friends have no idea, really, of what you know now. And if you take a look at all of the cases, so what was the first case that we did? The sweater, right? Fran and Miriam with the sweater. So that one, that's the first one. And it's actually the name of our chapter in the Gemara is called Shnayim Ochazin. Means two are holding, two are grabbing, right? So that was the first case. And how do we settle that one?
Have to swear.
We have to swear, right? Because there was, so first of all of these cases, especially when we're talking about a found object, we've gone through all of the possibilities in terms of returning to its owner, right? Because that's the first thing you do. If you find an object, then you can identify who owns it, so you're obligated to return that object. But in all of our cases, all those efforts were exhausted. We might even have looked for witnesses, and we found no witnesses. So here you have the two people coming into court, each one holding on to one end of this garment. Both say what? They say, I found it and it's all mine, right? And the only way that we can settle it is we ask them to swear. And what do they swear?
That is theirs.
That it's, how much of it is theirs?
Half.
No more than half. No less than half. Sorry. Right, they swear that they've owned no less than half. And then what we do is we divide it. So that, and the division could be if the item is the type of thing that you can cut in half and it still has a value, you do it that way. If not, then you sell it and you split the proceeds. Okay, so that was the first case. And as a sub case to that case, you had, the first one was 50-50, and then we did a 50, 57, we had a 75-25, right? Or actually, what was their claim? Two people came in, they claim holding on to the sweater, let's say. One of them says, I found it, it's all mine. And the other one says, we found it together. And it's half, belongs to half, each one half. So what is the resolution of that one? Remember, how do we resolve it? One is claiming it's all mine. One is saying it's half mine. So what's in dispute, Shane?
So
Fran,
the one who says it's all mine gets 50%, and then the one who says it's half mine gets 25%, and the other person gets another 25%.
Why? Why is that?
Because she's not saying the whole thing is hers.
Right, because what's in dispute? Only half is in dispute. The first, they both agree that half of it belongs to one of the,
Yeah.
so the only thing that we're discussing really is the other 50. And then on that 50, so the shvuah, the oath that they take is one swears that I own no less than 3/4. The other one swears I own no less than 1/4. Right, and then that's how it gets divided. Okay, so that's those two cases. Then we had the case of Marilyn's hat. Right? What happened with Marilyn's hat? So Marilyn saw a hat that she liked, and someone else saw the same hat, and they both wanted the hat. And now they go to the vendor behind the table at the Sisterhood Boutique, and they say, each one of them says that they gave money to the vendor, and they each want the hat, right? So how do we settle that one? We settle it also with a shvuah, because we have no way of knowing on our own who really, because the vendor is busy, right? Because, our Sisterhood Boutiques are very busy, and they didn't have she didn't really pay attention to who it was that gave her the money first, and a similar situation comes up. Then you have Harriet's cow and Tova's bull, right? Do you remember that case?
Yeah.
What happened in that case? Anybody?
She was sitting,
And
she was,
Oh,
and the
bingo.
bull,
Oh.
the cow had a baby,
Right.
and we had to decide whether, if the bull killed the cow before she had the baby,
Yeah.
or after she gave birth to the calf.
Right, because there was a cow and a bull that were in a pen together, and in the morning, we come in, we take a look, and we find there's a dead cow, which has been gored, we can tell it was gored, and there is a dead calf lying on the ground next to that dead cow. Now, nobody saw what actually took place, so we can't, so unlike the first couple of cases where we have two people making very strong cases, strong arguments, in this case, nobody is saying anything because nobody really knows. But we want to make sure that whoever is liable pays compensation to the one who had the loss. So in that case, we don't know whether the calf that's lying on the ground was born prior to the goring of its mother or after, right? And what difference would that make? Well, I mean, if the bull gored the cow before she gave birth, so now the bull caused the death of that calf, right? Fetus, calf, because it was inside the body of the mother. But suppose the cow had given birth prior to the goring.
Yeah, but we.
Exactly, we can't, can we blame?
Exactly, we can't blame anybody because nobody saw it.
Well, not only that, I mean, let's say we know that that's the case. If that were the case, the cow gave birth, and then the cow was gored by the bull, and now you have a dead cow and a dead calf. So can you blame the bull for that? No, because the calf was already born before the goring took place, okay? So how do we settle that one? What do we do in that case? Nobody can swear, right? Harry can't swear.
Right.
Tova can't swear because neither one of them was there. But we know something happened. So that's right. So what Jill is just saying, that the compensation that is paid to the owner of the cow and the calf is the full amount that's due for the cow and half of what will be due for the calf, okay? And actually, the way that the law works is that if this is not a habitual gorer, in other words, if this bull is not known to be one that does that, and most bulls don't go around goring cows and killing them. So the owner of the bull had no real obligation to take extra precautions to protect the cow from that bull, because that bull is not known to do that, and therefore the amount of damage that he has to pay is 50% of the value. So he's basically going to pay 50% of the value of the cow and 25% of the value of the calf. Okay? All right. So that's that one.
I didn't understand, why is he only paying 50%?
Because the rule is that that unless the bull is a known habitual gorer, which means he's done it 3 times,
Oh,
the owner of the bull is not required to be extra vigilant on that bull, and therefore if something does take place, he pays 50% of the value. Okay, so he has to pay half of the value of the cow and a quarter of the value of the calf. Okay. All right. Then we had the case of the landscaper. So we had Todd
Kate the money.
and Kate, right? Kate the storekeeper, and Todd the landscaper. And Todd has several properties he takes care of, but he wants to pay his people every Friday afternoon, and he pays them in cash. And he can't be in 2 places or 3 places at once, so what does he do? He asks Kate, and maybe in his other locations he has someone else doing it too, to lay out the money, right? To pay all the workers, and then on Monday, Todd will come and settle up. So what happened in this case?
He never got paid.
So one of the workers comes to Todd and says, "Hey Todd, I didn't get paid on Friday." And then so Todd says, "Well, let me check with Kate." So Todd goes to Kate, and what does Kate say?
I paid him.
I paid him. So now we've got a problem, right? How do we settle it?
Todd has to pay.
Todd has to pay. Todd has to pay them both. Why? Because if I come to Kate and I say to Kate, "This man claims you didn't pay," right? So Kate says to the landscaper, "Hey Todd, your worker, whatever he said, it's none of my business. You and I had an agreement. You asked me to pay your people. I did that. You need to pay me." The worker, on the other hand, can say, "Listen, she's a nice lady, but I don't know what's going on in her mind. I worked for you. You have to pay me." So what happens is Todd has to pay them both, and then hopefully after that he does better bookkeeping. But then we had the case of Jen and Bree. Jen and Bree are two stewardesses on a cruise ship, and they live off the tips. You know, the tips that they receive is where they really make most of their money, and they get the tips in cash, and they don't have a safe in their room. So they go to Eva, who has a safe in her room, and they ask her to watch the money for them until they come into the next port where they can deposit in the bank, whatever it is. So, but what happened is that Jen and Bree had different amounts of money. One had 100, one had 200, and they both gave it to Eva. And Eva was busy. She's getting ready, getting her passport ready and everything because she's gonna leave the ship. So she didn't pay attention who gave her what. She knows she got money from both of them. And now the ship comes into port, and Jen and Bree come to Eva, and each one of them says, "I gave you 200." So now Eva says, "Listen, we better go to court and figure this out because I can't give you both 200. You know, all I have here is 300." So what does the court do? How does it settle?
You have to swear?
Split it.
Kate says split it. Rita, what do you say?
They have to swear.
They have to swear, right? But the problem is that in the cases, let's say the case of the first case, Shnai Mochazim, if we ask them to swear to no less than 50%, it's very possible that they are both telling the truth. Okay, and it's possible that they both picked it up at the same time, and therefore they're both telling the truth. In the case in this case,
We know one of them is lying.
we know one of them is lying, and we don't want to be putting people in a position that they take a false oath. So swearing is not necessarily going to solve the problem. So in the meantime, 100 for each of them is again not in dispute, right? What's in dispute? The extra 100. So the majority opinion is we give them each 100, and the other 100 we set aside. Kate used the term escrow at the time. We put it aside, and what the Gemara says, it's left until Mashiach comes, until Eliyahu Hanavi comes, and he'll settle these disputes, right? He'll be able to figure it out. But that opinion is not universally accepted. Why not?
They need the money.
That's great.
Well, they need the money now, but I'm not talking about the litigants. I'm talking about the rabbis who are reviewing the cases, because if one of them gave 100 to Eva, and she says it was 200, and we give her 100, what does she lose by telling a lie?
She's on $100.
Well, let's say you have two people. Let's say Jen gave 200 and Bree gave 100, right? So now Bree says I gave 200, and we give Bree 100. What did Bree lose?
Nothing.
Right, what did she lose by lying?
She lost nothing.
Right, so that concept is called Imkain Ma Hifsid Haramai. If so, if this is the ruling, what loss was there, right? That's why we talk about in our popular laws where somebody swindles people out of money, they do some kind of a Ponzi scheme or something, and the courts demand restitution. Does that really solve the problem? You know, if somebody stole $10,000 from you and they give you back $10,000, is that a punishment to them?
No, there's no consequence.
No, they have no consequence. So in other words, by committing this act and just asking somebody to make restitution, nothing is gained, really. The person who committed it does not really suffer for having done it. So the second opinion is we take all the money and set it aside, because in that way nobody gets it.
But it's punishing the other person.
Take all the money and what?
Punishing
It's
person's
managing both of them.
Right.
And divided by the two people.
So what will be the mechanism? How would we make that happen?
Well, Eva has the money,
Eva has the money, right?
so she'll say.
And we trust Eva.
So, yeah, I would trust Eva. So just divide it up equally.
But how would we? I mean,
Oh, I see.
what-
But that's not
You're
fair
still
to the
rewarding
person
the
who
guilty
did.
party. You see, you said
Right,
that,
it's
then
not
you
fair to
put
the
the rest
person who
in
had 200.
aside.
Neither
Right.
is the other.
But then,
No,
you're
right.
right, that person that is lying has nothing to lose, and he has everything, he has everything to gain if they split the remainder. So
Exactly right.
what was the end result of that?
So the case is, two people are claiming the same amount of money, right? And we know that one of them is lying. We know that one gave 100, one gave 200. And so if we say give each 100 and set aside the extra 100, so then the person who's lying there's no consequence
Correct.
to lying.
He still got his 100.
So the other opinion is set it all aside. Don't give anybody anything. And in this way, everybody is suffering, and maybe the person who was lying would now just say, you know, I forgot, I made a mistake, because now there's a consequence, right? And to divide it, well, how could you actually do that? Because in that case, for sure, somebody's gaining, somebody's losing, and it's not like it could. There's no question that it could belong to both of them equally. That's just not so. So dividing doesn't exactly solve our Ada?
So what is the resolve on that?
So there's two opinions. One opinion is that we
To put it aside?
just put aside the extra
Right.
money, and the other is we put it all aside.
Oh,
And,
well.
yeah,
But what about with the one that's,
I don't-
oh, I'm sorry.
it's okay.
When you give somebody money, wouldn't you assume that he will write it down or make some kind of
Oh,
a
yeah.
note that this is the amount that they give, so
You
there's
would.
no question?
You would assume.
Why do we have all this discussion?
What do you want from me? What do you want from me?
When it reaches the court,
Even
it's
that's
beyond,
not right again.
they didn't give a note. It's
Well,
because
that's-
you couldn't solve it unless you went to the court, because.
Yes, once if you
those-
didn't write it down,
because if that person had given a receipt, we wouldn't be going to court.
that's
So
right.
this is the only way to solve now,
Right, if you
is give it
didn't.
to the court.
Right,
Everything else has been exhausted, I think.
exactly right. That we have no other way but for us to, as the court, to solve it, okay? So now, how about a case where somebody says that, I lent you, I don't wanna make you guys into borrowers, but let's say somebody says to me, comes to me and says to me, you know, I lent you $1,000 and I want the money back. And so if I say it never happened, if I say it never happened, basically the case is dismissed, because the assumption is that I would not have the nerve to lie to somebody who helped me out when I was in trouble, right? The other opinion is, though, that when I said it was that you didn't, that there was nothing. Oh, right. That's that case. How about if I said to him, it was 500. It wasn't 1,000. So now we've created a different situation, because.
And he knows it's 1,000.
Pardon?
You said it's 500 and he knows it's 1,000.
He says it's 1,000. He's sure it's 1,000, and I say back to him, it was only 500. So what have I done? What have I done?
The 500 is.
I've admitted to a partial
Yeah.
claim, right? And so then what the rabbis say, why did you admit to a partial claim? Is it that you denied the other half? So you've got a denial, just like if I said, I owe you nothing, is that what it is? Or are you basically saying, listen, I don't have the money right now, and I do intend to pay you, so I'm going to admit to what I can handle right now. And it's like I'll push him off until I have the money. And in that case, the borrower has to swear that was that the amount of the loan was only that 500. Okay. And if he's willing to take such a shvua, and again we assume people are not willing to do it because people don't like to do that, then he's off. But suppose the lender brings witnesses that saw $500 was lent. The lender is saying it was 1,000. The witnesses said, well, I saw you giving him 500. Maybe later today you gave another 500 or whatever. I didn't see that. But is that considered to be the same as his own admission of the 500? Right?
So
Is
the
it?
witnesses take precedence, what the witnesses say take precedence over what the person swears?
Well, so that's the question, because can the testimony of witnesses induce him to take a shvuah on the other 500?
So,
So there's a difference of opinion, whether, because once, if he admits on his own, so the rule is that once he admits himself, then you can ask him to swear. But if the establishment of the truth of the facts of the case is through witnesses, is not necessarily the same, okay? That's another
there's
case.
no answer.
Right. So then we had the case of the horse and the rider, right? So Marilyn was on the horse, right? And Shayna was walking alongside the horse, and they found and Marilyn was sitting on the horse, and she saw a $50 bill on the ground, and she says to Shayna, what did Marilyn say to Shayna?
Pick up the
Pick
money.
it up.
Pick it up.
Pick it up.
As Shane said, his sons.
So Shayna went down, picked it up, and put it in her pocket, right? So now Marilyn wants to take Shayna to court and say, listen, I pointed it out to her, right? And so in that case, so Shayna says, I never intended to pick it up for you, and I picked it up for myself. I have the right. So, but how about if Shayna picked it up, gave it to Marilyn, and then she said,
Let's split it.
I picked it up for me. I picked it up for myself.
Does she have to give?
Does Marilyn have to give that back to Shayna?
No,
No, because
because possession.
she has possession. She's holding it. And the rule is if I want to take away property from another person, I need to bring proof, right? And that's called a motzi mechaveru olav haraya, right? If I want to claim, right? If I want Myrna's car, for example, I better be able to produce a title, registration, everything else that shows that's my car. Because if I can't do that, she's not going to give me a car, right? So that's the case. Then we had the case of Peah. Remember what Peah is?
And the field.
The corner of the field, right? So, and what took place over there? What happened? Our case is, so if you have a corner of the field which has to be set aside for the benefit of the poor, right? When we harvest our crop, we have to set some aside. So Marcia has a field where she's growing wheat, and before the harvest, she sets aside a corner, and she says, "This is for the poor." That's called Peah. It's not just like Peah, like a Peah senior that the boys wear. But suppose you have one poor man comes along, or one person, let's say, who's not a poor man. So somebody who doesn't qualify, and the Gemara defines what it means to be poor, how much you have to have, what assets you have to have in order to be considered poor. But so let's say somebody who comes along does not qualify, and he says, I'm going to claim this Peah for the benefit of my son-in-law, who's struggling. He's going to law school. They make very little living, make very little money. I'm going to claim the Peah for him. He qualifies, right? And I'm going to make sure he still qualifies, because I'm not going to give him enough money to get him off the rolls. But I'm going to claim it for the benefit of my poor son-in-law. Does that
Can't
work?
do it.
No.
Does not work. Does not work, right? Because if you don't yourself qualify for it, what you're doing is you're creating a situation where all those others who are qualified are harmed, right, by the actions that you did for the benefit of another person. So then we had the case of somebody who is coming to pick up the Peah, and he picks up a few stalks of wheat, and he throws it on top of other wheat. Does that work, Rita?
No.
Does not work. Doesn't work. So he has to be able, because how do you take ownership of a movable object?
Possession.
Right, you have to lift it up. In the case of an animal, you have to lead it, and throwing something on top of it doesn't work. Which brings us to the Philadelphia fumble, right? Right, the football fumble, right? So when what's his name, Jalen Hurts fumbled the ball, so the Kansas City player, what did he do? He picked it up and he ran it in for a touchdown. If he fell on it, just fell on it, and someone else from the Philadelphia team came and snatched it out from under him, who gets to keep the ball? The snatcher, exactly right. Because falling on it doesn't work. So then we said, well, wait a second. And I hope you notice that there's a progression, you know, how the Gemara works. It goes, it like builds. So we coming to a case now where, isn't it true that my proximity, right? And we define that as my amos, right? Four amos, which is, let's say if it's 18 to 24 inches for an amos, so it's between 6 and 8 feet from where I'm standing in all directions. And we use the comparison to the sailboat race, right? If I get close to the mark, within a couple of boat lengths of the mark, no one else can come and barge in, right? I have the right to round that turn. So the same way, so the question is, if he fell on it, isn't that within his Dalet Amos?
No.
It is, because it certainly is. If I fall on something, it's within my, right? But what?
He didn't hold
Why
it.
don't I have it? Why don't I have it? Because
He didn't hold it and move it.
I'm not holding it, so we know that doesn't work.
And he has to move it.
But why doesn't the Dalet Amos work?
Because it's not his property necessarily,
It's not his property. It's in.
it's in a public,
It's in a public place, not in the middle of the street, but it's like off to the side of the road. But why then does his Dalet Amos not work?
Because he's not holding it.
Because what Fran just said is that in order for that to work, you have to intend it to work. Whereas if you're standing on the side of the road and you see a found object within that distance from you, and if you say, my Dalet Amos, my proximity to that will effect transfer of ownership to me, then that works. And then no one else can come and grab it. But if you, by your own actions, have waived that right by laying on it, now that's not operative. So if that's not operative, how do you then take possession? Now you get back to the original way in which movable property is acquired, which means lifting it, pulling it, carrying it, right? So he didn't do any of those things, and therefore the other team can take the ball. So far, all of these cases have dealt with objects that are static in themselves. They're not moving, right? So today we're gonna quickly cover two cases because they bring something different to what we've been doing, and we're gonna skip a little bit. I can't help that. But so if you open up to if you're in the Hebrew only, so it's Yud Aleph Amud Aleph 11a, right? And if you're using the English one, so you turn to 11a1, and we're at the Mishnah. Okay, so if you're in the English part, look for 11a1. If you're in the Old Hebrew, look for Yud Aleph Amud Aleph. Okay. So the Mishnah says, Yud Aleph Amud Aleph, look for the Mishnah. Yud Aleph Amud Aleph, look for the Mishnah. Yeah, it's, let me see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 lines down. Matnitim, exactly right. Okay, so Ra Osan Ratzin Achar Metzia. So somebody sees people running after a found object. But what is the found object that they're running after? Achar Tzvi Shavor. It is a deer with a broken leg. They're running after this deer. They want to claim it for themselves, but the deer can barely move, right? It's moving, but it's not running the way a normal deer would run. So in that case, what happens? Or achar gozelo shel parchu, or if they're trying to catch is chicks who are not flying yet. They don't fly. So they're mobile, they can move, but they can't really escape very easily from where they're located. V'amar, and this person says, Zachsali Sadai. My field, where these things are found, will take ownership of it for me. Okay? And we know that it's not automatic that your field takes ownership of property for you, because we talked about last week the case of the kids playing stickball, right? And the ball goes on Jill's lawn, right? And who owns that ball?
Boy,
The boys are playing ball, they own that ball. Jill doesn't own the ball, but Jill doesn't have to let them walk across her grass to get it, right? And so then they ask, well, how about Peah? How are they crossing over the field to get to the Peah? So the answer is that in modern terms, the poor have an easement. They have the right to cross the field. So the same way that we're talking now about changing cable providers in the village, right? So the new provider is going to have to dig a trench to put the fiber optic, whatever it is that they're putting in the ground. So they have to dig a trench. Can Century Village prevent them from doing that? No, they cannot. Public utilities have an easement to go through, even though it's not their property, they have the right to do it in order to provide the utility. So in the case of the ball, the boy does not have an easement, which means that even though he owns it, he can't get to it. So in this case, I'm mentioning this just to point out that just because something happens to be in your property doesn't mean it necessarily belongs to you. In the case of the deer is ownerless. It's an ownerless object, and you want to take possession of it, you need to do something to do it. You can declare that your land, your field, will effect that acquisition for you. Okay. However, so the Mishnah says Zach Solo. That works. In other words, if I don't know, Shoshana is standing in her field and there's a crippled deer lying there, barely moving around, and 3 or 4 people are running after that deer, Shoshana can say, that deer, which is lame, can barely move, my field is going to take ownership of it for me. Okay?
But even if 3 people are there and said, oh, my deer ran over there.
Oh no, if it's theirs, remember, all these cases, we have to, we're making an assumption. It's not that we're making an assumption, it's understood that in all these cases, there is no owner. There is no owner. If there's an owner, so the case of the stick ball and the rubber ball that's in the field, in the yard, Jill can't say that's my ball, because it's not her ball. That boy wants that ball back, but Jill can say to him, hey, you might want the ball back, but you can't walk across my grass to get it, right? So she doesn't become the owner of it, but so here you have an ownerless animal, and it's one that cannot move very well, and Shoshana says, my field will now take ownership for me. So the Mishnah says, Zach Solo. That works. However, Hoya Tzvi Rutz Kedarko, how about suppose this deer that's in question is running like a normal deer, right? Just like my beautiful wife. She had a hip replacement and she's walking like a normal person, right? So yeah, if you have a case where the deer is able to run normally, so in that case, the field does not affect an acquisition for him, because the deer can just run right through. So the field doesn't work, right? So Hoya Tzvi Rutz Kedarko, Osha Hoya Gozalos Mafrichin, or it's chicks that fly already, right? The Omar Zachsali Sadi, and Shoshana says, my field should take ownership of it for me, Lo Amar Klum. It's a meaningless statement, because that deer is going to be through that property in no time. Those chicks are going to fly off. So your field does not affect ownership of it for you.
Well, what if it's something that's moving slowly like a turtle?
So if the turtle is moving like a normal turtle, I guess you could say, because the turtle is going to keep going. But that's a good one. But I think it probably, and listen, the tortoise and the hare, right? Who won the race, right? So, okay. so now, how does this actually work? So you continue with the Gemara. Amar Rav Yehuda, Amar Shmuel. Rav Yehuda says in the name of Shmuel, V'hu she'omei b'tzad tzadeu, provided that Shoshana is standing next to her field. Now, she can't be some distance away, not seeing what's going on. She's got to be there. And in that case, it works. Okay. So we're going to skip again, and we're going to go to 12b, which it's 12b3. And this one, up until now, we haven't been able to assign ownership to anything. Everything has been, we can't establish that anybody who's making these claims really has ownership. But how about a case where a mortgage note is found on the ground, right? And if I don't know if Sharon borrowed money, right, Sharon? If you borrowed money and you gave collateral for that money, because actually, what is mortgage anyway? You know, people say I own the house with the bank. That's not really true. You own the house. The mortgage is the loan. Your house is collateral for the loan. You own the house. But so let's say you have a mortgage on your home, and that mortgage document is found in the street. So I know when we paid off our mortgage, we wanted the document back, right?
Yeah.
We didn't let the bank.
They let you have it back.
They
Of
give it
course.
to you, and it's marked paid in full on the day.
Yeah. So we wouldn't let the bank hold on to it, right? So, but by the same token, so now if it's in the possession of the borrower, right? So the borrower can say that loan is paid off, and the proof is that I have it. If it's in the possession of the lender can say, if that loan were paid off, I would have given it, right? So now here we are, we find this document, the lender's not here, the borrower's not here, and both of them are saying, it belongs to me, okay? So how do we handle that?
It's
Right.
not so easy.
What do we do?
Sorry, I had that, and my son, who is a lawyer, took him 10 years to find out, and because the borrower, the person that gave me the loan for the house lived in Israel, and he finished.
Even better.
I paid everything, and he said, yes, you paid everything, and he did it with a lawyer in Israel, but we didn't receive. When we go to the place here, they said, no, that house is not yours.
Okay, so
It's not
here's,
so easy.
so here is a real life case. Okay, we're running out of time, but I just want to lay the case out, and you know, we'll see what happens next year. But so okay, so what does the mission say?
Have to wait till next.
What are the chances we're gonna remember it?
Yeah.
Right, all of us, right. So the mission says, Motza Shitrei Chov, if he finds documents, promissory notes, Im yesh ben acharayos nechasim lo yaksir. If it is a mortgage or a document that has encumbrance on certain property, should not return it. Why not? We're going to see right away. Shebeis din nifroin mehen, because the court can step in and take care of the payments. Ein behen acharayos nechasim yaksir. And if there is no, we're going to have to go a little bit into the Gemara too, because you won't understand the Mishnah without it. If there is no encumbered property connected with this loan, then you do return it to the lender, right? She'ein bezdin nifroim, because the court has no power now. If there is no mortgaged property, the court has no power to seize the property. And what are we talking about? We're talking about a case that suppose. Okay, Marilyn, we haven't heard from you for a while. Marilyn has a mortgage on her house, and she sells that house to Esther, and she didn't pay off the bank. Now the bank comes to Marilyn and says, hey, so Marilyn says, I don't have it anymore. The bank can go to Esther. Because even though Esther has a deed and everything else, but who came first? The bank came first. The loan came first, so the bank has first claim on that money. So the bank can go to Esther and take the property away. Now Esther has to go back to Maryland and try to get the money. But, so the cases that we're talking about is that there is that sort of arrangement. And so what happens is, so this is according to Rabbi Meir. Chachamim omrim benkach ubenkach lo yaksir. So in either case, you don't return to the lender, Mimdesha Besdin and Freiman, because the court has a role. So I'm just gonna I guess tease you a little bit with how this thing actually works, because it is a little bit complicated and it's pretty interesting too. So the Gemara says, "B'mayos kina." What are we talking about here in this case? Suppose the lender admits to the loan, right? So the bank comes to Maryland, and Maryland says, "Yes, I do owe you the money." So can the bank go to Esther and take the money away? That's questionable. Because kiyesh ben achrayis nechasim amay lo yachzir. So if you're saying that there is a mortgage, and that property is mortgaged, why not? Why could the bank not take it away from Esther? So the reason is, and they said Hamoda, Maryland admitted she owes the money, right? So he says, and I'll just tell you this outside, that apparently, I don't know if we do this today. Anybody lawyer here today? So their practice was that if somebody wanted to borrow money, he would sometimes write out the note himself, because you had to hire a scribe, and that cost money. So the lender would very often be the one writing the note. And then he would go to the borrower. No, I'm sorry, the borrower would write the note because he wants to borrow the money. And he would go to the lender and say, "Here is the note. It's written, it's signed. I'll give you this note if you lend me the money." So the document was already written. And the case they're talking about is, suppose what happened was that, yes, there's a mortgage on the property, but suppose the note was written in Nisan and the loan was actually made in Tishrei 6 months later. Because that could have happened, because the borrower wrote the note, but he didn't get the money until Tishrei. But in the meantime, between Nisan and Tishrei, he sold the property. Right? So now, does the bank have a claim on that property? No, because the loan took place after the sale. After the sale. Even though the date seems to indicate that the loan took place before the sale, in which case the bank has first claim. But if the loan took place after the document was written, the bank doesn't have, and therefore, we don't necessarily give the document back to the lender, even though it lists a property which is mortgaged, and the borrower admits that they owe the money. But we don't necessarily give the document back. And so that's going to kind of wind up
This can't be, because quite frankly, you cannot sell a property that does not belong to you. So technically, the property